Good morning. I decided to make this last video. I think it will be the very last one that I make on concerning my father's involvement with Richard Hickok, and really a much more expanded story concerning my father, his life, and the story behind the man named Starling McNations, where he was from, who his family was, where he grew up. And in saying that, I decided here after the last 6 months, when I first originally made the video series called Footprints Found Inside in Cold Blood, I really didn't know what the reaction to those videos would be. I think that the reaction has been very, very good, and that most people, the majority of people that have spent time to view those have learned something that otherwise they would have never known about this case. And I appreciate everybody that has viewed those, and I appreciate the people that wrote to me and their expressions, their feelings towards this. And even though I know the video series was made only by myself, I don't have a producer or a director, it's not professionally made. I hope that people that continue to watch the video series will kind of put that off to the side and say to themselves, let's judge the content of what this guy is saying. Let's see the value of it. And I think that they're very valuable. And based on that, I decided here recently to pursue the printing of my own manuscript. It's an expose of my father's life. It's called Inside My Father's Shoes. I wrote it back, I completed it in September of 2013 and had it copyrighted in February of 2014. The story is in 3 separate parts. It is an edited raw manuscript of collected data that I have spent probably 40 some years in compiling. It wasn't all just about the story of the Clutter murders and my dad's involvement with the murderer Richard Hickok. That is part 3 inside the manuscript itself. But the first part is more of a biographical nature to explain where my father grew up, his surroundings, his family, his life early on as a boy, and growing up through high school during the Depression there in Kansas, and details about my father that I find rather remarkable. I have never met anybody like my own father, and I'm not just saying that because he was my dad. I'm talking about the kind of man that my father was. He was a very gifted person. He was very, very hard sometimes to understand, and I have not held back anything in this expose. This isn't a recreation of what might have happened or could have happened or should have happened. This is a story of what did happen. And it's very unlike the book that Mr. Truman Capote wrote and sold many years ago at the expense of my father. And I'll say that right now. I'm not concerned with any of the information that can be found inside my own manuscript. I have all of the data that has taken over 40 years to put in the symbol. I have that collected. So this isn't an account of somebody that didn't put in the time and the effort to nail this thing down. I have a very, very interesting story that I'm now making available for $25 that can be purchased through, pardon me, Taylor Printing Incorporated, 405 South Main Street, Pratt, Kansas, 67124. The telephone number there of the printing company is area code 620-672-7100, and they do have an 800 number, 1-800-870-7102. Now, the availability of the book to be ordered through Taylor Printing Incorporated will be the end of this month, June 30th of the month. The book can be ordered, and I was informed or asked to tell people when they do call to order the book that the book must be paid for at the time of the order. They accept MasterCard, Visa, Discovery. That would be the easiest way to pay for the cost of the book. I think that you'll find that the price of the book is very minimal in comparison to the contents inside the book. This is the whole 9 yards on my dad's life, as far as his involvement as a young man, a boy, then his teenage years, through World War II, through the service in the Navy. My father discharged as a first-class petty officer in the United States Navy after serving 3 years in the Atlantic and Pacific, and then came home and immediately resumed his duties as a newspaper man. I mean, I'm talking about probably within 1 week of being discharged after being in World War II for 3 years, he was back to work, and he wasn't the type of guy that waited around. He was a guy that made things happen. The second part of the book goes on to the political side of my father. He was very active in Kansas politics. He was appointed by the governor of Kansas, Fred Hall, in January 1955 to be his executive secretary. People might refer to that as chief of staff in the calendar year 55. I was born up in the state capital of Topeka while my dad was working there in the governor's office in the State House. There was an incident that later resulted in a IRS case that I have fully documented based solely on credible evidence related to that case, that it may read more like a trial transcript, but for historical reasons I deliberately wrote it like that so that there wouldn't be any error in what actually happened during that process. It is a complicated, very demented portion of this book, as far as the story and the people involved in it and what happened, and ultimately the trial itself and his acquittal. But when you find out what that case is really about, it's very, very disturbing. And it really hurt every member of my family very badly when all that was going on with my dad, and I have documented all that. This is just a mirror being held up to what it was really like going through all this stuff. And then the third part of the book, originally when I wrote this manuscript, I didn't have any page numbers on the pages of the manuscript, and people often said, well, why didn't you put number the pages? And I said, because when somebody asked me who Mac Nations was, they may have a small idea or a recollection of who my dad was to them, but I see my father as a whole person involved in all these things at the very same time. Really quite amazing. When you think about it after you get done reading this, it may strike you as being rather remarkable. I know that that's how I still see him. In life, I think it is better to see things as they actually are, rather than how you might want them to be. And I have written this expose in that fashion. So I really appreciate everybody that has spent time looking at the videos, and for people that have written to me with comments. I tried to respond to all of those, and I appreciated them taking their time to do that. And I hope that the people that order the expose find it to be a very, very, I think, add a moment of clarity in the middle of insanity afterwards. Now, I would caution anybody that's going to buy this book, the manuscript, Inside My Father's Shoes. This is intended for adult audiences only. And I think that that's a very big thing that I want somebody that is going to purchase this to know up front. So thank you so much for your interest in the subject, and I appreciate all of your interest.